My guest here today is Erik Solheim, the chief mediator from Norway during the Sri Lankan peace process. Welcome back in Sri Lanka.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
So I'm going to ask you the most pressing issue that Sri Lankans have about your visits. And there's been much speculation. Different political parties, different politicians are speculating about your visit to Sri Lanka and your recent appointment. So I'm going to clear the air. I'm going to directly ask it from you. Why are you here in Sri Lanka?
It's very clear. I'm here on the invitation of President Ranil Wickremesinghe, who's invited me to be his climate and environment international advisor. And what I can hopefully do is to bring some best practices on the environment from India, from China, from other parts of the world, as well as hopefully also investors who are ready to put money into the development of windmills, solar energy in Sri Lanka, and to protect the beauty of this fantastic land, the mangroves, the forests, the wetlands, where Sri Lanka can benefit from international carbon credits, which can pay for restoration of nature, and it will also, of course, help reviving the tourist industry in Sri Lanka.
So, this is about your appointment as a government official of the Wickremesinghe government. What sort of a role do you play? Could you give us some specific details about your role working in the Wickremesinghe government?
No, absolutely. We had a very interesting and very positive meeting yesterday with the people from all the key ministries which are handling environment issues. Minister of Environment, obviously, Minister of Finance, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Power, Ceylon Electricity Board, so many other institutions, to look into how together we can take Sri Lanka into the future. Look, Prime Minister Modi of India is setting up new solar industries in India by the day. In China, they're moving very, very fast on producing electrical vehicles or green hydrogen or hydropower or whatever. And Sri Lanka must move fast on this, otherwise it will be in the back seat. And this is an enormous opportunity for Sri Lanka to create jobs, prosperity, bring everyone out of the crisis, but do it in a green way. People in Sri Lanka are suffering now. It's a time of hardships for so many Sri Lankans, but the future is bright if Sri Lanka really invests in green sectors.
Now, other than being a peace negotiator, you have been a green champion of green energy and environmental sustainability. Do you think that Sri Lanka, now currently facing an economic crisis, could afford green energy at this critical time? As in, there's much belief that green energy is also very costly.
But that was the case 10, 20 years ago. But look, the price of solar energy has fallen 90% in one decade. Solar energy is now the cheapest energy anywhere in the world. If you move from coal to solar, not just it's better for the health and better for the environment, but you save money, which can be much better used in Sri Lanka for health and education and the other needs of the people. So if you stick to the old idea that it's a cost going green, you will be the loser, because the Indians, the Chinese, Europeans, they're all now moving very, very fast in a green direction because the cost is low.
Now, we've learned that Bangladesh is now building a nuclear facility with the help of the Russians. And now recently, the Sri Lankan government too started some negotiations with the Russians about nuclear technology and nuclear energy. What difference do you see between nuclear energy and green energy? As in, there's this talk saying that nuclear energy is far cheaper. What's your opinion on that?
First of all, Bangladesh by itself is a great example of how it's cheaper to go green. Bangladesh had agreed with China to build up some huge coal plants. Then Bangladesh said, no, we don't need this, we don't want it any longer. And the Chinese said, we will be much more happy to provide you with renewables. So all these plans for great coal plants in Bangladesh are skipped, and China will come in with green investments into Bangladesh. Nuclear is another option for getting energy. It needs to be done in a safe manner with no chance of this being used for nuclear weapons. There must be a storing facility for the nuclear waste. But if all this is put in order, nuclear can be a major source of green energy for the future.
So Sri Lankans now, they have started going for rooftop solar panels, and so far the government is not giving any incentives. And do you think that individual rooftop panels could do some kind of an impact on the overall green energy projects in Sri Lanka, other than just going and building larger, huge solar farms? What if the government gives incentives for people to have their own solar rooftops? Do you think it's better?
I think Sri Lanka need to do both. France have just mandated that every new parking lot in France need to be with the solar panels at the roofs. If you go to Germany, every farmhouse you see in parts of Germany, there are huge solar panels on the roof. So indeed, you can get a lot of energy from rooftop solar and from village scale solar. But added, of course, you need these big solar farms and big wind farms, which are now popping up in India by the day and in China by the day. Prime Minister Modi in India is incentivizing both rooftop solar in many states as well as big scale solar. And of course, wind energy may be as important an opportunity for Sri Lanka. The water between India and Sri Lanka is very shallow. It's a very good opportunity to build offshore wind there. And offshore wind doesn't come with the problems that you need landmass at land. You do it in the sea. Very limited impact, if any, on the fisheries. Very limited impact on birds. Very small environment consequences overall, and a huge potential source of energy for Sri Lanka if we build up windmills in the sea. And maybe also Sri Lanka can cooperate with Tamil Nadu on this, because Chief Minister Stalin of Tamil Nadu has massive plans for windmills in Tamil Nadu.
Okay. So you might be aware that during the past few weeks, Sri Lanka experienced a huge smog coming from India. So now the meteorology department said it was quite toxic. And what sort of measures can the Sri Lankan government take to avoid such calamities? As in, there were around a few deaths reported in Sri Lanka as well, mostly children and infants, like around 2 or 3. What sort of measures can the Sri Lankan government take to avoid such smog? Now, this is international. This is not created in Sri Lanka. This is most probably coming from India. What kind of a negotiation can Sri Lanka make with India to stop these kinds of smog, toxic gas coming to the atmosphere of Sri Lanka?
Well, obviously, Sri Lanka, there is not that much Sri Lanka can do just by itself when the smog is coming from India. But India have some really serious smog problems, particularly in the Ganga Valley in the north of India. But I'm absolutely sure that India in the next decade will find solutions to this and bring it down substantially. Look, 10 years ago, China was probably the most polluted place on earth. Now all the Chinese cities are very clean. You can see the sun. You can breathe the air. Why? Because the Chinese government has made an all-out effort to bring down pollution in all the major cities, Beijing, Shanghai, wherever in China. And India need to do the same. But I'm very confident that under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, and with great efforts by the states, this will happen. Because southern India, like Tamil Nadu, is not as polluted as the north of India. But Tamil Nadu has set up the climate mission for Tamil Nadu under the leadership of Chief Minister Stalin. And it's a great effort to green the land, to protect the beauty of the land, to make solar and wind energy happening, and of course to reduce the pollution in Tamil Nadu, even if it's less than in the north.
Now, President Wickremesinghe, I think last week, he went to the Alle tourist destination and he met with officials where he instructed them not to create any concrete structures polluting the area and taking away the scenic beauty. What sort of a connection does tourism and environmental sustainability have? As in, there's something called, we've heard a new term called ecotourism. Can that be a solution for Sri Lanka?
No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, tourist industry is probably the biggest job creator in the world. For the reason that if you run a hotel, you need a huge staff. There's no way you can serve the bears or make the, the great curries of Sri Lanka without a staff. If you run a car factory, you can do it just based on robots, no, very, very limited staff. So tourist industry is probably the biggest opportunity for Sri Lanka to create jobs for the people. And look, tourists won't come to some place where you see a lot of plastic pollution or where the hotels is run in a bad way. So to make the tourist industry in Sri Lanka greener is an absolute precondition for really capturing the tourist markets. And I had the opportunity this weekend to be in Galle with a huge amount of young Sri Lankans from universities and high schools, and we cleaned the beaches of Galle. With the support of some of the hotels in Galle, Radisson Hotel in Galle, they put up money for this and they mobilized some of the staff to take part in the cleanup. Why? Because they know that a clean environment will attract a lot more tourists, which will bring cash, most needed cash and jobs to Sri Lanka.
Now, President Wickremesinghe went to Egypt a few months ago for the climate summit, where most Sri Lankans weren't much aware of what climate change is, and maybe it's because of the education system that the climate change is not much promoted. And they're asking why the government is so much focused on climate change and building a climate change university in Sri Lanka, where the country is going through an economic crisis. What do you have to say for the doubters of climate change, where there are even deniers, there are even climate change deniers, even in Sri Lanka?
My answer is that these views were right in the 20th century. 20 years ago, it was right. There was a cost to be paid if you wanted to go green. In the 21st century, it's not like that at all. Going green, create jobs, make your health better, your lives better. So it's exactly the way to get out of the crisis. If Sri Lanka decides that they want to stick to the old, or to be a global loser. If you move with India, with China, with the European Union into the green economy, you will compete to get the better jobs, get prosperity, bring up this nation. So Sri Lanka needs to be part of the future, not part of the past.
Okay. And there's much, just when I started the interview, I just said there are a lot of speculation, and there's a lot of fake news going on Sri Lankan social media, mostly Sinhalese social media, about your visit to Sri Lanka. What do you have to say for the Sri Lankan public about your job here in Sri Lanka, and what do you think the Sri Lankan government expects from you?
I think President Wickremesinghe, but also all the other leaders I meet, expect me to provide the best possible advice to Sri Lanka on green issues. Also met with Sajid Premadasa, the leader of the opposition. He invited me to provide green inputs into his party platform, and invited me to meet with some of his party cadres to discuss green issues. So I think everyone expects me to bring investment, help bring investment, and help bring the best knowledge. I'm particularly focused on what's happening in India and China, and I think I can bring quite a lot of information about what these two big developing nations are doing. I don't think at this time there is no role for foreigners in finding solution to the ethnic issue in Sri Lanka, but for Sri Lanka to do itself. It will happen through the all-party talks, because people inform me about what they're doing in the all-party talks, for sure. And I'm very confident now that when the all-party talks have the support from President Wickremesinghe, leader of opposition Sajid Premadasa, former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, and all Tamils and Muslim parties are in support, I'm very confident that Sri Lanka will find solutions, but not with foreign interference, just by themselves.
Okay. This would be my last question. Do you expect Sri Lanka to get out of the economic crisis that is now prevailing in the country? Now, there's a lot of hope that this government has brought stabilization to Sri Lanka. And there's a lot of hope that within the next 2 or 3 years, we would return back to normalcy, back to 2018, before the Easter attacks. Do you think at this rate, the Sri Lankan government would be able to, I mean, if it secures funding from the IMF and other international organizations, go through debt restructuring, would be able to stand up on its feet within the next 2 to 3 years?
Yes, indeed. I'm very optimistic on behalf of Sri Lanka. But look, for the last few years, nearly all news coming to India or to Europe from Sri Lanka has been on the negative side. You had this horrible Easter terrorist attack, you had the COVID, and then you had the economic crisis. So if you sit in New Delhi or in Berlin reading about Sri Lanka, the news have been negative. And that tells you, I mean, you should not go there as a tourist, or if you're an investor, you should not invest there. But when President Wickremesinghe makes an agreement with the International Monetary Fund, as well as with China and India, and I'm sure it will be managed to do that, and when there is positive outcomes of the all-party talks, there will be good news coming from Sri Lanka, good economic and good political news, and then tourists will be happy to come. This is a beautiful place. It's the most fabulous place on the earth. You can get to fantastic national parks, great tourist attraction, most beautiful beaches in the world, with a car in 3 hours from Colombo. There's no other place you can get all these in such a short distance. So tourists will come and investment will come, but on the basis of these economic restructuring and on the basis of the all-party talks. But on that, I'm very optimistic. But sure, I mean, there are hardships for people now. There's no way of denying that. Inflation is high. People have difficulties finding ways of covering their bills. So we should absolutely, the international community should really feel sympathy and support for Sri Lanka. But on the basis of Sri Lanka solving its own problems, tourists will come back in big numbers and investors will come.
Just to add another question. Now, you have been a very prominent Norwegian politician. What sort of experience can we as Sri Lankans get from Norway?
I'm not sure there is so much to learn from Norway, but maybe if there is something, it's the ability to find compromise. You can never get it exactly your way. You need to work with others and to find compromises between the political parties and, of course, between the ethnic groups of Sri Lanka is key for the future of the nation. But that's what everyone tells me. They want to find solutions within one Sri Lanka and to live peacefully together and with gradually rapid economic development.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us for this interview. Thank you for clearing the air in Sri Lankan social media as well as other media. Thank you very much for your valuable time as well. So we will join you another day, hopefully. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Okay.